It began with a sound, small, dull, and out of place, a single thud that traveled through the wooden floorboards on a cold Thursday night. At first, Daniel's mother thought it was nothing more than the water heater settling, or maybe the wind pushing a loose shutter outside. But the sound came again the next night, the same time, the same exact heaviness. She didn't panic. She didn't assume anything strange. Not yet. But she noticed. Parents always do. When something inside the home shifts out of rhythm, it has a way of getting under your skin. The Harper family lived in the same house for 15 years. A simple home, 2 floors, 1 basement, and more memories than space. Nothing about the place was strange. Nothing about the family was unusual either. Michael and Linda were normal parents who worked hard, argued about grocery bills, and bragged about their children to neighbors. Their son, Daniel, was quiet, polite, and easy to overlook in a noisy world. 17 years old, good grades, kept mostly to himself, and had a habit of answering every question with the smallest nod. A typical teenager, or so they believed. But homes aren't always what they seem, and children aren't always who they appear to be. This story didn't begin with a crime scene or police tape. It began with a mother who felt deep in her stomach that something in her home had changed, and a father who thought she was overthinking everything. Linda brought it up during dinner. "Did you hear that knocking sound last night?" she asked quietly. From across the table, Daniel didn't look up. He rarely did. His fork scraped his plate with slow, deliberate movements, like he was listening more than eating. Michael shook his head. "Probably the furnace again. I'll check it on the weekend." Linda nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the floor. That thud hadn't come from the furnace. She was sure of it. It had come from beneath them, from the basement, a part of the house no one visited except for laundry or storage, a part of the house that had always been silent, but silence can hide secrets. Most people believe they know the layout of their own homes better than anything else. They trust the walls, the floors, the doors they walk through every day, but very few people ever wonder, what if someone changed something? What if a new space existed without your knowledge? The truth is, hidden rooms are far more common than people imagine. They appear in true crime cases again and again, spaces created for privacy, obsession, escape, or something darker. But in this family's story, the Harpers had no idea they were living above a secret. That same night, the sound returned, louder. This time, Michael heard it too. They were lying in bed, the house dark, when something knocked against the underside of the floor, right below their bedroom. He sat up immediately. "That wasn't the furnace," he whispered. Linda didn't reply. Her heart was already racing. Parents always fear what they can't see. The unknown inside their home is the worst of all because it forces them to question their sense of safety. And when safety cracks, everything inside begins to shift. The next morning, Michael finally went into the basement. Dust floated through the air as he clicked on the single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling. Nothing unusual at first glance. The old treadmill in the corner, plastic bins stacked on metal shelves, a cracked cement floor, and the washing machine that rattled each time it ran. Completely normal, empty, silent. But when he walked toward the back wall, something felt off. He noticed a thin draft of air brushing against his ankle. Cool, steady, coming from a place where there shouldn't be airflow at all. He crouched down, pressing his hand to the floor. The concrete was colder than the surrounding area. A detail easy to ignore, but impossible to unfeel. Still, he didn't panic. Not yet. He brushed dust from his jeans, switched off the light, and told himself it was nothing. People convince themselves of many things when the truth feels too heavy. Over the next few days, however, something else changed. Daniel became different. Not dramatically, not in a way that would alarm anyone who didn't already love him, but parents noticed the small things, things others never catch. He started locking his bedroom door more often. He came home later than usual, slipping past them with tired eyes and a forced smile. His backpack seemed heavier, his clothes smelled faintly like soil, though he never went outside for long, and his shoes, always dusty. One Sunday morning, Linda walked into the kitchen earlier than usual and found Daniel already awake, sitting at the table in the dark. No lights on, no breakfast, just silence. She tried to speak gently. "You okay, honey?" He nodded once, staring into nothing. His voice was low. "Couldn't sleep. You want to talk about it?" "No." One word, firm, hollow. He stood up, walked back upstairs, and locked his door behind him. Something was wrong. She felt it with every instinct a mother can have. But fear is tricky. It often whispers before it screams. And sometimes, parents choose not to listen because listening means accepting that something dangerous might be growing inside their home. That evening, the thud returned. But this time, it wasn't alone. There was movement. A dragging sound, slow, heavy, muted, like something being pulled across the basement floor. Or someone. Michael and Linda froze, staring at each other with wide eyes. The sound was too real to ignore now, too close to deny. They stepped out of their bedroom and listened at the top of the stairs. The noise stopped suddenly, cut off in a way that didn't feel natural. Michael finally whispered, "I need to check again." But when he reached the basement door, it was locked. The Harpers had never locked that door, never needed to. They didn't even remember where the key was. Yet now, the door was shut tight, as though someone had made sure no one could go inside. Linda's voice trembled. "Why would it be locked?" Michael didn't answer. His mind was racing, and upstairs they heard the soft creak of footsteps in the hallway, Daniel walking toward his room. Later that night, after Daniel fell asleep, Michael retrieved a set of old spare keys and tried them one by one until the basement door finally clicked open. It felt wrong even touching that doorknob, like he was crossing into something he wasn't supposed to see. He descended the stairs slowly, each step echoing into the cold air. But what he found at the bottom wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. The back wall of the basement, solid concrete for 15 years, had a new seam running across it, a thin straight line, too perfect to be a crack, too recent to be ignored. As he stepped closer, he noticed fingerprints smudged across the edges, dust disturbed, cement dust scattered, and then he saw it, a faint outline of a door, hidden inside the wall, a door that never existed before, a door someone had created, someone inside his own home, someone he thought he knew, someone named Daniel. The next morning, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mark barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that small hatch in the basement floor, the one that didn't belong. Dawn light crept through the curtains, but it didn't bring comfort. Instead, it seemed to highlight every unanswered question lurking beneath their feet. Linda stood by the kitchen counter, clutching a mug she wasn't drinking from. Her eyes were on Mark, searching for reassurance he couldn't give. "We should have gone down there last night," she whispered. Mark shook his head. "We weren't thinking straight. We'll check it today. Together." Linda hesitated before asking the question that had been eating her alive. What if he's down there? Mark didn't respond, not because he believed it, but because part of him feared the possibility. Their son had been unpredictable for months, withdrawn, defensive, secretive. They didn't want to think he was capable of anything dangerous. But hiding a separate basement room, that wasn't something a normal teenager just builds. After breakfast, or rather, after pretending to eat, the couple stood at the top of the basement stairs. Mark reached for the light switch, but before he flipped it, Linda grabbed his wrist. "Wait," she said. "If he's hiding something, what if we're not supposed to see it?" Mark looked at her gently. "If our son has a hidden room under our house, then we deserve to know why." He turned on the light. The bulbs flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered basement. The floor was still dusty, except for that one patch, the clean square with the faint outline of a door. Mark grabbed a crowbar. Linda winced at the sound of metal scraping against wood as he wedged it under the edge. The hatch lifted with a dry groan, sending a drift of dust into the air. Underneath was a narrow wooden staircase leading downward. The steps were old, much older than the rest of the basement structure, and cold air drifted up from the darkness, colder than anything in the house. Linda shivered. "Mark, what is this?" He didn't answer. He was already grabbing a flashlight. When he clicked it on, the beam cut through the darkness like a blade. The stairs seemed to go deeper than they should. The house wasn't that tall. The foundation wasn't that deep. Something was wrong. Mark placed a foot on the first step. It creaked but held. Linda followed, gripping the railing. Except the railing wasn't really a railing. It was metal piping, old and rusted, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Halfway down, Linda whispered, "Mark, the walls." He turned the flashlight. The walls weren't concrete like the rest of the basement. They were stone, rough, uneven stones packed together with something that looked like ancient mortar. "This isn't part of the house," Mark said quietly. "This was here before. Before them, before their son, before everything." The stairs led to a small landing, and at the bottom stood a wooden door. It didn't match the stone walls. It looked newer, handmade, rough around the edges, like someone built it using whatever scrap material they could find, and scratched into the wood were dozens of lines, tallies, counted one by one. Linda's breath hitched. Someone was keeping track of something. Mark didn't want to think about what. He grabbed the door handle and froze. It was warm. Mark, don't. But he had to. With a deep breath, he pushed it open. The smell hit them first. Stale, metallic, and oddly sweet, like damp earth mixed with old rust. The flashlight beam trembled as Mark raised it. The room was bigger than it had any right to be. Almost a full chamber hidden beneath their home. The walls were stone, but the floor was dirt, freshly disturbed dirt. Someone had been here recently, and then they saw it. Against the far wall was a mattress, thin, dirty, with a blanket carelessly thrown on top. Next to it was a wooden crate being used as a table. On it lay a flashlight, an empty notebook, and several pens, some broken. The notebook was open. Linda moved closer. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Page after page was filled with scribbles, not writing, not drawings, just frantic loops and repeated words. I'm not alone down here. I hear it at night. It knows my name. Mark's voice cracked. This isn't our son's handwriting. Linda's hands tightened around the notebook. Then who wrote this? And why is it under our house? Before Mark could answer, his flashlight beam moved across the room and landed on something else. A camera. Old, dusty, pointed directly at the mattress. There were wires trailing from it into a corner of the room where a small metal panel was attached to the wall. It looked like some kind of old monitoring setup. Not modern, not digital, analog. Something built years ago. Linda covered her mouth. Mark, this room was used long before Josh was even born. Mark's hand trembled as he lifted the panel cover. Behind it were faded labels. Room A, Room B, main feed, storage. All disconnected now. But once, someone had been watching. Someone had set this up intentionally. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from the ceiling, the living room floor directly above them. They both froze. Another thump. Another. Slow. Heavy. As if someone was walking inside their house. Mark turned off the flashlight, plunging them into silence and darkness. Linda clutched his arm. Her heartbeat was loud. He could feel it. Footsteps moved across the living room, then down the hallway, then toward the basement door. Linda's voice trembled. We didn't lock the door. Mark pulled her close, both of them standing in pitch black, listening to the sound of someone descending the first basement step, then the second. A shadow moved faintly above, the shape of feet on the staircase. Linda whispered, barely audible, Mark, what if it's Josh? But Mark already knew. Those steps didn't sound like a teenager. They were too slow, too heavy, too deliberate. Whoever was in their house wasn't supposed to be there, and they were coming straight toward the hidden room. For a moment, neither Mark nor Linda dared to breathe. The darkness around them felt alive, tightening around their ribs, turning every sound into something sharper, heavier. Up above, just beyond the hatch, they heard the slow, crushing weight of footsteps moving down the basement stairs. One step, then another. Old wood groaned under each movement. Whoever was coming down wasn't trying to be quiet. They weren't afraid of being heard. And somehow, that made it worse. Mark placed a shaking hand over Linda's mouth, silently begging her not to make a sound. Her breath trembled against his palm. He could feel her body trembling against him, her hand gripping the sleeve of his jacket so tightly her nails dug through the fabric. The basement stairs creaked again. Whoever was descending had reached the halfway point. But then, the steps stopped. The entire basement went still. A heavy silence swallowed the air so completely that Mark could hear the faint ringing in his ears. He slowly turned his head upward, staring at the faint glow of light sneaking through the open hatchway above. A shadow passed over it. The silhouette of someone standing right at the top of the hidden staircase. Right above them. Linda's eyes widened, gleaming faintly in the dark. She shook against him, terrified to the point she couldn't even cry. Then the voice came, soft, low, and unmistakably familiar. Why, are you in my room? Mark felt his blood run cold. Linda's knees buckled. It was Josh's voice, but it wasn't the light, joking tone they knew. This voice was hollow, strained, as if someone had drained every emotion from it and replaced it with something cold. Mark swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. Josh, son, come down here. We just want to talk. Silence. The figure didn't move. The next words from above were whispered, but somehow they echoed through the stone room like a scream. "You shouldn't be here." Mark's throat tightened. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Linda. "Josh, we found the hatch. We found the room. We need you to explain." "You're not supposed to see it," the voice snapped, sharp like cracking glass. The sound ricocheted off the underground walls, sending a shiver through both parents. Linda's voice broke. "Josh, sweetheart, just come down. Talk to us, please." But instead of responding, Josh's shadow slowly moved away from the hatch, and his footsteps drifted up toward the main floor of the house. Then silence again. But what terrified them most wasn't his words. It was the sound of the basement door slamming shut upstairs, followed by the screech of metal sliding across the floor. He was barricading them inside. Linda's voice was barely audible. "Mark, why would he lock us down here?" Mark didn't answer right away. He was staring at the open hatch, brain racing, adrenaline surging through him. "We need to get out," he whispered. He grabbed the flashlight again, flicked it on, and scanned the hidden chamber. The beam danced across the stone walls, the mattress, the old crate, the strange wires, then landed on a second door. Not the wooden one they entered through, but a smaller, rusted metal door embedded in the far stone wall. "What is that?" Linda whispered. Mark moved toward it, stepping carefully across the uneven dirt floor. He tugged the handle. It didn't budge. A corroded lock held it in place. The metal was cold, too cold, like it had been untouched for years, maybe decades. He shined the light along the edges of the door. Scratches marked the stone around it, deep scratches, like someone clawed at the walls trying to escape. Linda backed away. "This isn't Josh's doing. This whole place was here before him." "Then how did he find it?" Mark muttered. "What was he doing down here? Sleeping? Spending nights?" But Mark's attention had shifted to the dirt floor near the mattress. Something felt wrong about it. He crouched down, brushing his hand across the soil. It was loose, freshly disturbed. He dug deeper with his fingers until he hit something solid. Wood. A piece of it. He wiped the dirt away, revealing the corner of a wooden box buried beneath the soil. Linda gasped. "Mark, don't open that." He didn't listen. He clawed more dirt away, enough to get a grip on the box. It was heavy, too heavy for something small. He dragged it out and set it on the floor. Dust puffed into the air as he flipped the lid open. Inside were objects wrapped in yellowed newspaper. He unwrapped the first, a small handheld recorder, old, dusty, but still intact. He unwrapped another, a stack of photographs. Linda covered her mouth. "Oh my God." The photos weren't of Josh. They weren't of anyone they recognized. They were of strangers, taken inside this very room. Some looked terrified, some looked exhausted, some were asleep, and all of them seemed unaware they were being watched. Mark felt bile rise in his throat. He grabbed the recorder and clicked play. Static crackled, then a voice emerged, shaky, whispering, terrified. "I hear it scratching behind the walls. It waits until I'm asleep, but I know it's there. I know it's real. Please, please don't lock me down here again." Linda stumbled backward. "Mark, turn it off." He did, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt smaller now, suffocating, filled with the weight of decades of fear and secrets. "Josh didn't make this," Mark whispered. "Someone used this place for something dark." "But why was he coming down here?" Linda asked, her voice breaking. "Why would he hide this from us?" Before Mark could answer, something metallic clinked above them. They both froze. It sounded like the lock on the basement door sliding, then footsteps again, slow, steady, coming down the stairs. But this time, the steps were heavier than before. These weren't Josh's. Linda tugged at Mark's sleeve, her voice trembling. "Someone else is in the house." The footsteps reached the bottom of the main basement stairs, then stopped right at the edge of the hatch. A long breath escaped whoever, or whatever, was standing there. Then a low voice drifted down, cold enough to turn their blood to ice. "Get away from that box." The voice from above was nothing like Josh's. It was older, rough, and too calm for someone who had just trapped two people underground. Mark's breath froze in his chest. Linda instinctively moved behind him, gripping the back of his shirt so tightly that her fingers trembled. The footsteps shifted again, slow, controlled, almost as if the person upstairs wanted them to feel every second of their fear. Dust drifted down from the ceiling, catching the thin beam of Mark's flashlight. Then the voice came again. "You shouldn't have opened it." Mark swallowed hard. "Who are you?" he called out. "Where is our son?" Silence. Then, "He's safe, for now." Linda's knees weakened. "Where is he?" The person above didn't answer. Instead, the shadow at the top of the hatch slowly lowered, until the outline of a head appeared. The flashlight flickered, struggling to cut through the darkness. Mark raised it higher. Linda gasped. The man standing above them was tall, with broad shoulders. His clothes were worn, stained with dirt and something darker. He wasn't young. His hair was long, messy. His eyes, though barely visible, had a strange stillness, a coldness. He didn't look like someone who had broken into their home. He looked like someone who had always been inside it. Mark stepped forward, holding the flashlight tight. "Tell us where our son is." The man finally spoke, in that same unsettling calm. "He shouldn't have come down here. No one should." Linda's voice cracked. "Why? What is this place?" The man stared at them for a long moment, then said, "This isn't a room. It's a holding space." Mark felt chills crawl across his arms. "A holding space for what?" "For people," the man answered simply. "For the ones brought here years ago. The ones who needed correction." Linda shook her head as tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're lying. Why would anything like this be under our house?" "Your house wasn't always yours," the man replied. "Someone lived here long before you moved in. Someone who believed certain people needed to disappear." Mark's grip tightened on the flashlight. "You're talking about the previous owner." The man nodded once. "He built this place. He used it. And when the police found nothing, he simply walked away." Linda covered her mouth. "But then why are you here?" The man exhaled, the sound long and tired. "Because I was one of them." The words hit the room like a punch. Mark blinked. "One of what?" "One of the people he kept down here," the man said. "For weeks, for months, until I learned to do what he asked." Linda's voice trembled. "What did he ask?" "To watch," the man said. "To guard the room, to keep it hidden." Mark felt sick. "You're telling me you've been staying in our house?" "No," the man said firmly. "Not inside. Under." Mark's stomach dropped. "The tunnels." The man nodded. "I lived beneath your home for years, not because I wanted to, but because the one who kept us made sure we could never leave. He controlled everything. Even after he disappeared, we stayed. We didn't know how to function outside these walls." Linda's breath came out in broken gasps. "How many of you are there?" The man paused. "Not enough anymore." The room went silent. Mark tried to step forward. "Where's Josh?" The man looked down at the wooden box Mark had dug up. His jaw tightened. He took something from the tunnels, something dangerous. Mark felt the hairs on his neck rise. "What did he take?" The man's eyes dropped to the recorder and photos. "Proof," he whispered. "Proof of what happened here. Proof that was never meant to be found." Linda felt her heart collapse inside her chest. "So you took him?" The man shook his head sharply. "No, I didn't touch your son. He ran when he saw me. I tried to stop him. Not to hurt him, but to warn him." "Warn him about what?" Mark demanded. The man leaned down, lowering his face toward the hatch. His next words were spoken quietly, but carried a weight that froze both parents in place. "He isn't the only one living down here." The flashlight flickered again. Linda grabbed Mark's arm so tightly that he nearly dropped it. "What does that mean? Who else is down here?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his head and stared into the darkness behind them, the far corner of the room. Mark turned slowly. He wished he hadn't. The stone wall in the corner wasn't a wall. There was a narrow gap between two stones, too small for a person to fit through, but large enough for shadows to slip through, large enough for something thin, something silent, to pass by unnoticed, something that had been watching them the entire time. A soft scratching sound echoed from inside the gap. Linda screamed. The man above them reacted instantly. "Get away from the wall, now!" Mark grabbed Linda and pulled her back toward the staircase. But the scratching turned into something else, a low, hungry groan echoing from deep inside the stone. The man shouted again. "It smells the dirt you moved. It knows the box is open." Mark felt panic explode inside him. "What is it? Who's in there?" The man's voice was almost a whisper. One of the ones who never left, one who didn't learn, one who forgot how to be human. The scratching grew louder, faster, coming from behind the wall. Then, a single, pale hand shot through the gap, nails long, skin stretched tight. It clawed at the air, reaching, digging, desperate. Linda screamed again, collapsing against Mark. The man above yelled, "Run! I'll hold the hatch open! Get out!" Mark didn't think. He grabbed Linda, practically lifting her, dragging her toward the stairs. The stone behind them shook. Dirt fell. The arm twisted and strained through the gap, reaching for the sound of their footsteps. Mark pushed Linda up the stairs first. She scrambled, sobbing. The man reached down, offering his hand. She grabbed it. The moment Mark's head reached the top of the hatch, he heard it. A deep animal-like growl from beneath. Not human, not sane. The man slammed the hatch closed the second Mark climbed out. He shoved a metal pipe through the lock. The growling intensified. Something slammed against the hatch from below. The wood shook. Dust exploded upward. Linda collapsed in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. Mark turned to the man. "Where is Josh? Tell me." The man pointed toward the back door. "He ran into the forest behind your house. He's scared, but he's alive." Mark rushed to Linda, helping her stand. The man stepped toward the basement door, pressing his palms against it as the creature below pounded harder. "You two need to go find your son," he said. "Now." Linda wiped her face. "What about you?" The man gave a small, sad smile. "This is still my prison, not yours." The house shook again. He screamed, "Go!" Mark grabbed Linda's hand and pulled her out the back door into the cold night air. Behind them, the house shook from another violent impact. But they didn't stop running. Not until the forest swallowed them whole. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, their son was hiding. And behind them, under their home, something that used to be human was finally awake.